can get started. I have a couple of people that have emailed saying that they can't make it and they'd like to watch this recording because um, they really like Kristina. They've seen her presentation before, but they just, want a refresher. So we're really excited to have Kristina here with us from the Bureau of Narcotics. She comes to our summer conference and it's it's one of our more popular sessions. So we wanted to do a webinar with her for our Now You Know webinars that our instructors have requested. So every month we try to hop on here for an hour, give them a little bit of PD. And Kristina, I'm gonna let you go ahead and take over for us.
Okay, well, I'm more of a in-person kind of girl, so I'm gonna hit share screen and hope that this works the way it's supposed to. I've only done it once during COVID, so you guys can walk me through this if this doesn't work right. All right, and I'm not really sure how to do the full screen, but can you guys see the PowerPoint?
We can. All you need to do is up at the top, you can go from beginning.
Okay.
Yep. And it should just start your show.
All right. How's that?
Perfect.
Okay. All right. Well, once again, my name is Kristina Marcotte. I'm a criminal intelligence analyst with the Oklahoma Bureau of Narcotics. I work here in our Tulsa district office. Our headquarters, of course, is near the Capitol in Oklahoma City, but we have offices all over the state, Woodward, Ada, Ardmore, Tulsa. We have task force offices now all over, like Ponca City, Elk City, McAllister, Muskogee. So we're really trying to branch out all over the state and not leave a single stone unturned as far as drug enforcement. Just a tiny little bit about me. Again, I'm in the Tulsa district office. We cover 17 counties in the northeast corner of Oklahoma. We also handle diversion. We'll get a little bit into that in a second. We have diversion, enforcement, compliance, and MET, which is where I'm stationed at right now with the marijuana enforcement team. We have task force officers here from OSBI, HSI, which is Homeland Security, and BIA, which is our Bureau of Indian Affairs. I'm sure you're all familiar with the McGirt decision. Basically, almost the entire state of Oklahoma is considered tribal land. So it got a little bit more complicated for us when the Supreme Court passed their McGirt decision. So we've had to kind of pivot and work a lot closer with our federal partners. It worked out nice though, because we gained a canine, Tyson. If you know anything about OBN, we're basically an undercover type of operation. We don't have OBN vehicles per se. We can't pull people over. So it's nice to have Max with us from BIA, because we can have him do traffic stops for us, and then he can run his drug dog. And it just makes things a lot less complicated for us. We also just gained a HIDA representative, which, if you're not familiar with HIDA, it's the High Intensity Drug Trafficking Area. It's a federal program that has different, we're part of the Baltimore HIDA and the South Texas or Texas HIDA. So we actually have somebody here who's a retired DEA agent who now works part-time for HIDA under a federal grant. And he helps us with our intel gathering and just kind of keeps us apprised on what's going on with our other partners in the DEA and other federal agencies. I'm from San Diego. I started my law enforcement career a long time ago in 1994. So I have about 20 years of experience doing different things. I started out as a dispatcher in the 911 center, dispatched police, fire, and EMS, did some emergency medical dispatching. When I moved out of California, I was actually a tactical dispatcher with the SWAT team. So I got to go out with them on all their high-risk search warrants, barricaded subjects, anything like that they were deployed on. I got to go out and run their command center. was in charge of their communications and acquiring their equipment that they needed and other assets. So that was exciting. And now I'm doing criminal intelligence. So I've only worked for 3 agencies in my career: Escondido PD, which is in San Diego County. And then when we moved here to Oklahoma, I worked for Broken Arrow PD for a few years. And then I worked for OBN twice, actually. I worked at headquarters when I first got on with OBN, and then a position became available in Tulsa. And so I took the Tulsa position. Worked a few big events in my law enforcement career. Of course, Y2K. It's kind of funny when I go and speak to the college kids now, none of them have any idea what that was. And I have to explain to them how everyone thought the world was going to end when it went from 1999 to 2000, because none of the computers or the banks or anything were going to recognize 00 as a year. So everybody kind of freaked out. And I remember drawing straws that night in the dispatch center because nobody wanted to work the main police radio at midnight that night. And I just volunteered. And as we all know, the world pressed on. Nobody died. So we're all here. Then, of course, 9/11, everybody remembers where they were when that happened. I also worked 9/11. And I was actually pregnant with Sydney. That morning I was about ready to have her, and I remember thinking, what am I doing bringing a child into this world? It could be the end. So that was a big deal. And then, of course, COVID-19, everybody, who would have thought they could shut the whole nation down for months at a time. But we all survived. We will survive. So I only put this in there because when I'm talking to the college kids, I like to tell them that if you do something that you love, you will never work a day in your life. And I love what I do. And I think that shows in your work product. When you come to work every day and you work someplace that you love, you actually pour yourself into what you do. And it's nice to be recognized for that. In 2021, the Association of Oklahoma Narcotics Enforcers, we call them A1, presented me with the President's Excellence in Service Award as a civilian employee. And I like to reference this too because I see Analyst as a force multiplier. We're a tool that dramatically amplifies our agents' effectiveness in their cases. We can bring so much to their cases, that things that they can't do themselves. So I like to bring that up. But then 2022 happened. Nurse Nancy knows I was supposed to speak in 2022 at your guys' conference, and that just didn't work out because I found out I had breast cancer. But I like to put this in there too because I was healthy my entire life. I never smoked. I don't drink. I ate good. I grow my own food. I have a greenhouse. Nurse Nancy's been in it. I did everything I was supposed to do. Got my mammograms every year. Had no family history. And I found a lump. And I just like to tell everybody that please listen to your body. My doctor missed it. My mammogram missed it. Nobody knows your body like you do. And it can happen to men too. Do the self checks. And if something's not right, don't wait. Go get it checked out. That's my public service message for today. All right, so now to the nitty gritty. OBN, the Oklahoma State Bureau of Narcotics and Dangerous Drugs Control. We are a law enforcement agency, and our goal is to minimize the abuse of controlled substances. We do that through several divisions that we have: diversion, interdiction, enforcement, human trafficking. We have a training division that was just started, and our marijuana enforcement. A lot of people don't know what an analyst is. I like to liken this to all the kids who watch a lot of Netflix and TV. This is probably the most realistic depiction of an analyst on TV. Now, granted, nothing happens as fast as Penelope has it happen. You don't just plug something into the computer and have a person's whole life story come back to you in a second. We can get that information, but it takes a lot longer. Sometimes I can send a subpoena off to AT&T to find out just who the subscriber is on a telephone number, and it can take a month to get that back. So this is a great show showing all the things that she can do. And we do have a lot of resources at our disposal, but it's not always this glamorous. But I get it. They have to fit that into an hour show. So What is intelligence analysis? Well, it's a lot of things. It's kind of a basket of things. It involves collection, evaluation, analysis, integration, and the most important thing is the dissemination of information, because I can collect stuff all day long and hoard it all to myself, but it doesn't do any good unless I disseminate it to the public, like today, or to my agents. So it's a group of actions. And my favorite quote is, information is not intelligence, and I'll tell you why. Information can be a lot of things. It can be gossip, hearsay, conspiracy theories, stereotypes. Intelligence is something that has to be verifiable. It has to be fact checked. There has to be truth to it. And most importantly for us, it has to have value. A lot of people are afraid of Big Brother spying on them and things like that. We don't do that. The things that we are interested in have value for a specific reason. And for us, that's the diversion of illegal drug use. This is a quick example of how an analyst can be a force multiplier in an agent's drug case. I like to call her Amanda. That is her real name. But so we had a confidential informant that was stopped. Well, he was stopped and then he decided to help us, to help himself, and became a confidential informant. He told us about a lady named Amanda who was dealing drugs. And that's who he had gotten his drugs from. He didn't know her last name. He only knew her by Amanda, and he knew that she drove a certain vehicle. So we located the vehicle, but of course the tag did not come back to her. And we find that a lot, that they buy used vehicles from people and never change the registration, or they drive around with paper tags. Big red flag. So we had to identify Amanda. This was back when we could use our facial recognition. They've taken that away from us temporarily just because it's in litigation right now. A lot of people don't like that invasion of privacy aspect. Me personally, and this is not OBN's opinion, but if you're not out doing crime, why do you care if I see you in Quick Trip buying your drink or your coffee? But anyway, so this was back when we could use it. So one of our agents followed her into a Quick Trip. She was buying her cigarettes. He got a picture of her on his cell phone. We ran it through facial rec, got a hit, found her Instagram page. Her Instagram led me to her Facebook page. And I was able to figure out who she was because she changed her name. It was Amanda, but it wasn't her legal name, but she kept her birthday on there, which is kind of funny because, you know, everybody judges how many friends they have by how many birthday wishes they get on their birthday. So people will change their names. They'll go by their first and middle or drop their last name completely, but they never really change their birthday. So just having her first name and her birthday, I was able to figure out who she was. So found her driver's license, ID'd her, ran her, and discovered that she already had an arrest warrant. So obviously this was her daytime job. So we put a tracker on her car. We got a warrant from a judge, put a tracker on her vehicle, followed her around for a while, did some surveillance, saw how many people she was selling to, where she was picking up from, where she was dropping the money off at. Once we kind of figured out what was going on, we had Tulsa Police Department pull her over for us. Again, I mentioned we didn't have Max yet in Tyson, so we have to rely on our law enforcement partners in whatever city or county that we are needing help in. So Tulsa PD pulled her over, and they knew from us that she had a warrant and that she probably had some drugs in her car. But they did their due diligence and ran her license, saw the warrant, confirmed it, put her in handcuffs, searched the vehicle. They found quite a bit of methamphetamine, and they also found a stolen gun. So then we were able to interview her and get some information from her. We tried to flip her and figure out who her source was, but she was uncooperative, so she went to jail. She didn't want to help us. So unfortunately, it didn't work out that great for her, but that's one way that we can try to figure out the people that we're dealing with. One of the other things that I do, I talked about gaining information but not disseminating it. A couple years ago, they put me in charge of writing an intel bulletin every month. So for OBN, I write a monthly analyst intel bulletin, and it's basically intel and officer safety information, new and trending drugs, things that I see in the news or in bulletins that I get that I think are pertinent or important to my agents at OBN. So I compile those every month and I write a newsletter and I put that out to all of our agents in the field so that it's not just the analysts holding all the cards. They can actually put it to use in the field. So on to the drugs. Everybody knows fentanyl is a big topic right now. Everybody pretty much knows a lot about fentanyl at this point. It is one of the most lethal drugs that we have here in the state of Oklahoma and in the nation. I like to point out though that it is 100 times more potent than morphine and many times that of heroin. It can result in accidental death with just one dose. You can see there compared to a penny, that's about how much it takes to kill an average adult that has no tolerance for fentanyl use. I've heard stories, we call it the chocolate chip cookie effect. And we've heard stories where, say, two teenagers bought a counterfeit, what they thought was a Percocet or an Adderall. And they cut it in half and they think that, you take half and I take half. Well, one of them overdoses and dies and the other one doesn't. How do you explain that? Well, we call it the chocolate chip cookie effect because it's like pouring chocolate chips into your cookie dough. There's no way that you can control where those chocolate chips are going to go. These drug dealers, they are not chemists. They are dumping that fentanyl powder into whatever they're cutting it with, whether it be acetaminophen, anything. And they just stir it up a couple of times and then they fill up their pills and put it in the press. So there is no guarantee that your half is going to have fentanyl in it or that it's not going to have all of it in it. So I caution anybody who handles or tries fentanyl that to be aware that you have no idea how much is in that pill. I like to show this because even as a law enforcement professional, I don't feel good about trying to make that distinction between the authentic M30 Oxy and the fake one. If I was going to take one of those, I think the fake one looks more real than the authentic one to me. So that's how scary it is for our kids out there experimenting with these pills. I would not make that choice myself. If anybody doesn't have Narcan, this is a good way to get it. Go to okimready.org and you can answer a couple questions and they'll mail it to you for free. They distributed more than 22,000 naloxone kits and 35,000 fentanyl test strips in 2022. Funny note, we went on a search warrant in January, just last month, where we were at a subject's residence and I was standing by the kitchen table and there's a box of fentanyl test strips and naloxone on the table. And I go, "Hey, where'd you get this?" And he goes, "I got it in a vending machine." And I said, "Where's that?" He said he got it at the gas station there in Stroud at the toll booth, the turnpike toll booth. So they're starting to pop up in these vending machines where you can get the free naloxone and the test strips. And obviously I carry Narcan. I have like 4 in my backpack. I've got them in every door panel in my truck. I don't know anybody that uses it, but you never know. I mean, you could pull up to the gas station to get gas and someone could go down. And I'm sure you guys all know that you can give Narcan in good faith and Good Samaritan laws will protect you. It's not going to hurt anybody. It's safe for children. There is some literature out right now. Originally, they said that you could keep giving it dose after dose until the person woke up. Now they're saying, no, not a great idea. It can actually force them into withdrawal, which can be a really painful reaction for them. So they're saying maybe 2, 3, always call 911 first, get those medics on the way, give your Narcan. I would give maybe 2, and then I would wait for your emergency professional to show up before I would give a 3rd one. But I'm not a doctor, so that's just what I'm reading. I'm sharing my intel with you. A new drug that I like to talk about that you may or may not have heard of is xylazine. This is kind of my pet project. I discovered it through Intel bulletins back in May of 2021. After 6 months of reporting on these monthly Intel bulletins that I put out, finally got our OBN partners on board to try to get this scheduled. Xylazine is an animal sedative. They give it to cows and horses and other large animals when they're going to do surgery or procedures on them. It originated illicitly in Puerto Rico. They call it anestia de caballo because they use it on horses when they float their teeth. Philadelphia was ground zero for illicit xylazine use in the United States. It is making its way to Oklahoma. We know it's here. We had a wire case where we heard people talking about it. It is so dangerous. It is not FDA approved for human use whatsoever. They call it tranq by itself, obviously, because it's a tranquilizer. They call it tranq dope if it's mixed in polydrug form with something else. We've seen it mixed with fentanyl, methamphetamine. It'll kill you in one dose. You can see there in the South had the greatest percent increase in xylazine positive overdose deaths by region, over 1,100%. The one thing that you can notice with xylazine abuse is that it leaves these abscesses and open sores, ulcers on the skin. It's really nasty. I put those pictures really small so that you couldn't see them up close. And what's really sad is that these people are so afraid of opening up new wounds someplace else that they are injecting xylazine into these open wounds because they don't want to open a new one someplace else on their body. Some of these get so bad that they require amputation. One of the other things I do is public service speaking, like I'm doing today. I go around to high schools, parent nights, PTA meetings, DARE, wherever anybody asks me to come, I try to be there if at all possible. I feel like what we do at OBN is important, and I feel like a lot of the information doesn't get out to where it needs to be, which is with the teachers and the students and the public, the parents. So I try to get around as much as I can. Icebreaker, does everybody know who this is? The most interesting man in the world. This is the most interesting cat in the world. His name is Milo. He lives on my farm with me in Claremore. So much bad news. I try to break it up a little bit. One of our other divisions is diversion. And diversion happens when illegally manufactured and distributed pharmaceutical is diverted into an illegal market. So you get a prescription for your hydrocodone and you turn around and give it to somebody else. That is a felony. You can only take a controlled substance if it is prescribed to you by a medical doctor. You can't share it with your husband or your sister, and you cannot turn around and sell it to somebody else. That is also a felony. I always think of a case we had involving a veteran at the VA. He went in and got his 30-day supply of hydrocodone, came out to the parking lot, and he had people waiting to buy it from him for $1 a pill. Unfortunately, that is not something that you're allowed to do. So, and it's not just patients either. It's doctors and nurses. Anybody can fall victim to addiction. We have doctors who write prescriptions to themselves. We have doctors who write prescriptions to their nurses in exchange for other things. We got away from a lot of that when we started mandating the e-scribing. So we don't have a lot of handwritten prescriptions going around anymore. They kind of go straight from the doctor to the pharmacy. So, and you have to have that PMP login, the prescription monitoring program that we'll also talk about here in a second. So, but we do still have abuse. This is one diversion case that I was following in Alaska, where this nurse practitioner was sentenced to 30 years last year for prescribing over 4 million fentanyl pills to her patients. One woman in particular was prescribed 1,500 fentanyl lollipops for her headaches. Some patients died, and so she was held accountable for that. This is a Supreme Court case that I found that even my diversion agents hadn't heard about. It wasn't highly publicized, but I guarantee you that it's going to have an impact on the cases that we prosecute for diversion. After that nurse practitioner was sentenced to 20 years, I actually found this, and it's Ruan versus the United States, and the Supreme Court ruled that that now we have to prove that they acted with malice, that these doctors knowingly and intentionally wrote prescriptions with no medical purpose. How many of you have met a doctor who is going to admit that they knowingly miswrote a prescription? No, that's where the term doctor complex came from. They are going to argue that they know better than we do because they went to medical school and we didn't. So this is going to really make our cases harder to prove, because we have to prove now that there was intent, or that they stood to gain financially or otherwise by overprescribing. Prescription monitoring program. I touched on this a second ago, our PMP program. This was something that we put into place in 1990, and it requires all controlled substances to go through this prescription monitoring program. So you go to your doctor and you hurt your back, and he prescribes some oxy. He logs into the prescription monitoring program and he puts your patient information in there. There he can see all the prescriptions for controlled substances that you've been prescribed for the last several years. This has eliminated doctor shopping. We had people who were going into an urgent care and saying that they hurt themselves and getting a pain medication prescribed to them. Then they would go across town into a different urgent care and do the same thing. Now, anybody who prescribes a controlled dangerous substance has to go through the PMP program. And that's also why, like when you go into Walmart, CVS, and you pick up your prescription, they ask you for your driver's license. If it's a controlled dangerous substance, a CDS, they have to put an ID in there for the person picking up the prescription. And that just adds an additional layer of monitoring to make sure that we don't have overprescribing or people doctor shopping for controlled substances. Another thing that I do is overdose detection. I get an email every time somebody in the state of Oklahoma dies by an overdose. And we map those through this OD map, which was created by our HIDA partners that I talked about earlier. So I'm able to go in and see this heat map and see where we have a concentration of fatal overdoses. And a lot of times that helps us to try to pinpoint, if there's bad dope being circulated around out there, or if we have one person who's out there overselling. It just helps us try to figure out where our hotspots are with our overdose fatalities. The information is fed into there by the medical examiner's office. So every time they go out on a fatality that they suspect to be an overdose, they put that information into this system. We get an email and we're able to log in there and see which agency is handling it, if they're going to need our help or not. A lot of the larger agencies like Tulsa PD, Oklahoma City, they have detectives who investigate these crimes. A lot of the smaller ones, though, like say maybe Inola, they may not have the manpower or the resources to investigate an overdose death. It involves a lot of, collecting cell phone data and things. Who was the last person they talked to? Can we get information on their text messages? Can we see who they bought it from? Can we identify the dealer or the supplier? So if they want us to come in and help them and assist on those investigations, that's what we do as a state agency. This is my other kitty. She's helping me at home. I put all my animals to work. There's no freeloading going on here. She's also trained to back me up when I need. Enforcement. This is the other side of our office, enforcement, that does all of our undercover stuff. They do all the cool stuff that you see on like Chicago PD. They're undercover, they're doing drug buys, they're working their confidential informants, doing surveillance, doing all of our undercover chats on Facebook, WhatsApp, Snapchat, all that kind of stuff. This is my daughter's cat. I thought this cartoon was funny. I saw it in the Sunday paper and I thought that it really applied to what we do. She got into my garden and got pollen all over her face, and she came into the house like, oh my God, get it off, get it off. So I thought this cartoon was funny. She's also cross-trained. I even had hood chickens at my farm. I'm telling you, nobody gets a free ride. Okay, some of the good stuff. This was a funny kind of story that we did out in, I think it was Delaware County. So 2 people get pulled over in a traffic stop and they have a little bit of meth on them. Well, they go, we've got this information. We can tell you where we got it from. We know we get it from this guy down the street. Well, the police department didn't really know how to follow up on this. So they called one of our agents. Well, the agent went out there and interviewed these folks and determined that they had pretty good information about who they bought their meth from. So he wrote a search warrant for this house and we went out there, and in the course of serving the search warrant, we had agents standing out on the street and a lady pulls up and they're like, can we help you? And she goes, yeah, this is my boyfriend's house. And they're like, well, we're in the middle of a search warrant. You need to move on. And she goes, well, I know where he's got more stuff. And they're like, really? She says, yeah, he's got it in a storage locker down the road here at this storage unit. And they're like, can you show us? And she said, sure. So she took us over there, pointed out the storage unit. We wrote a search warrant for that storage unit. And inside the storage unit was all of this meth, 2 rifles, and 2 suitcases full of money. So we ended up with 231 pounds of meth, over $500,000, and 5 firearms combined with what was in the house and the storage unit. All of that from a little traffic stop out in the country. This is my dog, Luna, and she is here to talk about wiretaps. I'm sure you've heard about wiretaps in the movies and on TV. This is one of our last ditch efforts that we use because a wiretap is the most invasive pry into a person's privacy that law enforcement can do. It takes a lot to get. We have to write an affidavit that's probably the size of a novel to get a judge to agree to a wiretap, or a T3 is what they call it. And basically, it gives us open access to a person's phone. We can hear live phone calls. Every time they get a phone call, we get a phone call. We can read their text messages in real time. We get all of their multimedia. We get their sexting, their pictures, everything that they do, we have open access to. They're usually for about 30 days. We go up on a wire target and we listen 24/7 for 30 days. We identify criminal activity. We identify all of the co-conspirators. We have units out in the field chasing these phone calls down, doing surveillance, identifying and photographing drug buys, hand-to-hands, stash houses, everything. And then at the end of that 30 days, when we bring the wire down, we do what's called a roundup. We identify all the people in this case that we're going to indict, and then we go and round them up. And then the case agent interviews them, and then they go to jail. So we have one, it's basically an organized crime case. It takes a lot to prosecute these. I was just subpoenaed this past January, last month, on a wire case that we did in 2022. So it's been 2 years and it's just now going to court. It takes a lot of time, manpower, to keep these going. Our canine interdiction is my favorite. If you can't tell, I'm an animal lover. So I love what these dogs do. These are the only vehicles that you will ever see that say OBN on them. And that's because they are actively working the highway, I-40, I-35. We've got some up here now that are working 44 in the turnpike, that have a Rogers County deputy in them and some other task force officers that have combined with our interdiction unit. So you'll see them, they work a lot around the Hard Rock, in the interchange with the turnpike there in 412. They're actively pulling over vehicles that are running drugs and money. These guys really know what they're doing. It amazes me every time they put a picture out. They find these drugs in amazing places. This was 10 pounds of methamphetamine and 4 pounds of marijuana that was coming from California through Oklahoma and headed to Alabama. We don't just look for drugs, we also look for money. If you can see the dog's face back there, he's so proud. They're always so proud when they find what they're looking for. There's Yiko up there on the table posing with almost over $1 million in cash, 720 pounds of marijuana. Oklahoma is a hub. Because of where we're situated in the nation, we have I-35 running north and south. We have I-40 coming through east and west. Everybody going everywhere in the United States with drugs or money almost always passes through Oklahoma at some point. So, and our proximity to Mexico adds a lot to what we do. This is my other dog, Ruby. Just wanted to throw her in. I don't want to leave anybody out. Human trafficking. You wouldn't think that human trafficking is something that the Bureau of Narcotics would be involved in, but there is a lot that goes hand in hand between human trafficking and drugs. Back in the day, back when, back in the narcos era, when all the marijuana was coming from Mexico, it was all grown outside. And so there was a certain period where they couldn't do that during the winter. So how are you making money if you're not growing marijuana plants and sending them to America? You're trafficking people instead. So a lot of these drug cartels are still running people, and it's a money-making machine because they collect the money up front. It's all cash. Obviously, there's no guarantee that they have to provide a return on the investment. They can drop them off at the border. They can get them across the border and just leave them in the middle of the desert. Some of them make it up here to Oklahoma. If you remember last year, there was a semi truck out towards Oklahoma City. I think it was in Grady County, that was just abandoned and had a bunch of migrants just left in there, locked in this 18-wheeler that was abandoned, that nobody ever came to claim them. No food or water. It's a terrible ordeal, and we're finding that a lot more with some of these marijuana grows too, that they're bringing people not just from Mexico but China and other places to work some of these marijuana grows, and they're not paying them until the job is done. And by definition, if you're holding them there in lieu of payment, then that falls under the human trafficking laws in Oklahoma. So we do pay attention to that. We do have a big gang presence here that also has to do a lot with running drugs here in Oklahoma. If you're interested in this kind of thing like I am, this is a great book, MS-13. It talks a lot about how they were created actually in the United States. They're from El Salvador, but when they came up to Los Angeles, a lot of them were incarcerated for petty larceny and other crimes, and they were incarcerated in California, and the Mexican mafia kind of took them under their wings and made them into what they are now. So we kind of created them and then deported them back to wreak havoc on their own country. It's interesting if you're into that. Another thing that we see that analysts are are good for is that we have a lot of data in our head, a lot of things that the agents may not be privy to or have seen themselves or be aware of. A lot of times the Mexican drug traffickers in particular pay homage to La Santa Muerte. She's kind of the angel of death. They liken her to the Virgin Mary being the saint of birth. She's kind of the saint of death. And so we see these altars a lot of times on these marijuana grows. This was from a house that the lady was storing and selling heroin. And it gives us a clue about where the drugs are coming from, where the money is going, what kind of activity is involved, cartel activity and such. That's another book down there that I read, Santa Muerte, that talks about where she came from and the story behind it. This note here down in the right, it's kind of blurry because it had perfume sprayed on it. A lot of people that pray to Santa Muerte, they know that she likes pretty things. They bring her alcohol, they bring her money, they bring her flowers, anything that any woman would like. So they put these on the altar. So they wrote her a note and they sprayed it with perfume and they left it there. And when we served the search warrant, we found it and translated it. And it basically said, I humbly ask that the money come to me, that nothing robs me, and that I do not lack anything this week. Open the roads. So she was praying, our courier was a female. She was praying to La Santa Muerte to open the roads, not let her get pulled over, and pray that the money came back to her. So this gave us a lot of intel about where she was going, where the money was coming from, the drugs, and tied into the cartels. Marijuana. This is what I live and breathe right now. And I think all of you know that Oklahoma is inundated with marijuana right now. We're writing a search warrant right now for Tuesday, next week. We are literally doing one a week right now. If you weren't familiar, in June of 2018, Oklahoma voters passed State Question 788 legalizing medical marijuana. When it passed, OMMA, the Oklahoma Medical Marijuana Authority, and OBN had just 90 days to implement the entire system. A lot of people didn't realize when they voted on this state question, because it was 150 pages, that it said it had 90 days to implement it. That meant licensing, registration, how we were going to enforce it, everything. So we weren't prepared, and it showed. We know that. So what it didn't do is require a patient to prove a medical need. So basically anyone can get a medical marijuana card. You don't even have to go see a doctor anymore. You can just log into a website, answer a couple questions online, and they give you the prescription and you pay your $150 or whatever it is now, and you get your medical marijuana card in the mail. Easy peasy. And on the back of that medical marijuana card, it tells you what you're entitled to have legally in your possession. That's 3 ounces on their person, 8 ounces of residue, 1 ounce of concentrate, 72 ounces of edibles. They can have 6 mature plants for their own use and 6 seedlings. All of that together equates to 616 joints and 864 gummy bears, edibles, at one time for one person. I bring this up just to put things into perspective, because in a nutshell, the elixir tragedy of 1937. So Massengill perceived a demand for this medication in liquid form. It had already been available in a tablet and powder to treat strep. So one of their chemists figured out a way to compound it with diethylene glycol. I see a couple of gentlemen on this. Does anybody know what diethylene glycol is used in? Antifreeze. Yay, Laura. Yes. So they proceeded to ship 633 bottles all over the country. It had not been tested for toxicity. Subsequently, it was responsible for the deaths of more than 100 people in 15 states. Who gets strep the most? Little kids. Yeah. Unsuspecting parents who believed that this Massengill company knew what they were doing gave this medicine to their children who died a slow and painful death because they took antifreeze as medication. What it did do that was good was it led to the passage of the 1938 FDA Act. So it increased the FDA's authority to regulate drugs. Today, this approval involves a 5-step process, but yet a single vote by the people of Oklahoma deemed marijuana a medicine. Crazy, right? So by the numbers, as of February 3rd in 2022, there were 382,000 cardholders and over 8,000 licensed grows in the state of Oklahoma. So assuming that each and every cardholder smokes 1 joint a day and each grow produces 1,000 per year, cardholder demand could be filled by just 1.2% of our licensed marijuana grows. To update those numbers just a little bit, we had a group meeting just last month on the 22nd where we went from our maximum of 9,400 licensed registrants down to about 3,200 presently in some stage of renewal. We've also sent out about 2,000 letters that are letting people know that they have until the end of the month to bring forth any documents or requirements that they're missing, or they will be shut down. So we're about to get really busy. In a nutshell, you can see here for perspective what Oklahoma has. We only have 644 liquor stores, 927 retail pharmacies, but we have 1,800 dispensaries. And I know you guys are sick of looking at them. They're on every street. Sometimes they're in the same strip mall. It's kind of like I've never figured out why they put a Quick Trip right across the street from a Come and Go, but it happened. Think of how many McDonald's you see around Oklahoma. The entire state only has 155 McDonald's, 84 Quick Trips. Amazing. And people say it's just weed, right? I mean, Snoop Dogg based his whole career off being high and smoking a little weed. I mean, we all laugh about it. But since the passage of 788, we've seen an increase in mental health and substance abuse, an increase in pediatric marijuana exposures. There were more than 7,000 exposures to edible cannabis in kids under 6 between 2017 and 2021. That's more than a 1,300% increase in just 5 years. In California in 1995, the average THC potency of marijuana was just 3.9%. In Oklahoma, we're seeing almost 20% THC content. 13% of young users will become dependent. And over half of car crash victims, just over 54% of injured drivers had drugs or alcohol in their systems, with THC being more prevalent than alcohol. So when you see DUI drivers or people being arrested for drunk driving, 54% of them are going to be marijuana and not alcohol. If you want more on this, the National Survey on Drug Use and Health has a plethora of information on this topic, and I can push out that link again later if anybody's interested on reading more. A study published in the Journal of Health Economics found that a lot of people thought that when marijuana passed that it would decrease the opioid crisis, right? Because people could get marijuana legally and they wouldn't have to use fentanyl. Well, when they first started observing it, it did appear to reduce shortly after medical legalization policies took place, but then it actually turned around in reverse direction with medical marijuana legalization, actually made greater opioid death rates. When they talk about marijuana being the gateway drug, this is exactly what that means. Most of our users are starting with marijuana, now they're vaping, now they're putting other things into the vape cartridges. We're getting fentanyl. And so it's actually feeding the opioid crisis. This is a good book if you're interested. It was presented at the A1 conference this year. This was written by Johnny Stack's mom. He was 19 years when he ended his life by suicide after he went into a cannabis-induced psychosis. It talks a lot about her national effort to reach out to parents, family members, professionals, teachers, to talk about the harmful effects of marijuana on our children. Flash forward to 2023 in State Question 820. This was going to make recreational marijuana legal, and it was rejected by 60% of voters. We were floored. We knew it might be close, but we were pretty sure it was going to pass as a law enforcement agency. We had no idea that Oklahoma was so sick and tired of marijuana. I think all of our farmers are tired of sitting on the front porch of a home that their families owned for 100 years and smelling marijuana from the lot across the street. We're sick of all the dispensaries. We're sick of seeing all the billboards on our way to work every day. It's just marijuana everywhere. And I think Oklahoma did not realize the impact that it was going to have when they agreed to medical marijuana. And I think State Question 820 proved it, that we're really cracking down on it now. And it's hopefully we are going to have a huge impact on marijuana in 2024 as an agency. People ask, well, what are you doing? What are you doing? In 2022, we seized 28,000 pounds of processed marijuana, which equates to 26 million joints. We also seized 222,000 marijuana plants, which is 201 million joints. That would provide every single Oklahoma 51 joints or a weekly supply. We've increased our registration fees to $2,500. If they are late, they have a 30-day window to put in their renewal packet and pay their $2,500. If they are 30 days late, it doubles to $5,000. House Bill 2281 addressed straw owners. I'm sure you guys have heard of that, but if you haven't, that was a huge thing in Oklahoma because part of 788 was you had to be an Oklahoma resident for at least 2 years to be a majority owner on any OBN registration. So we had a lot of people coming from out of state, California, Oregon, Colorado, China, all over the world, who wanted to grow weed in Oklahoma, but they didn't meet the residency requirements. So they paid people, they paid straw owners to be on the OBN registration and fulfill that registration residency requirement. So we're really cracking down on straw owners, and we're going back. If their OBN registration can be traced back to a straw ownership, we are still closing them down. So, and then of course, House Bill 2282 amended our show cause process so that if we come out to your marijuana grow and you're growing illegally and we shut you down, not only are you shut down and we confiscate all of your marijuana and burn it, but we can charge you a $50,000 eradication fine for our time and effort and our resources and put you on a 5-year prohibition from being on another marijuana license moving forward. So we are really doing everything that we can to get these illegal marijuana growers out of our state. These are some pictures of some grows that I've been on. This was a migrant grow where they were using migrant labor to work this marijuana grow. These are pallets that this poor guy is sleeping on, bottled water. He's sleeping under a fly trap. Just trash. It was just disgusting. This was another one. He was living in a tent. His cot there is made out of tree limbs. That was the kitchen. Dirty water, pots and pans. That's how he heated his food. I show this one because this was one that we went up in Fairland, and our young people think that this drug life is so glorified. This guy I came across, he had the whole altar there with the Santa Muerte, the offerings, the candles. He had Jesus Malverde up there in the top left-hand corner. He's another one that we see a lot, who's kind of like the Robin Hood of Sinaloa, kind of like Pablo here. He would trickle down his money and He built schools and churches and libraries and such. You know, this kid, he was only 22 at this grow, and he has this tattoo of Pablo on his arm. And I said, hey, that's a really nice tattoo. You know, we all watched Narcos on Netflix, right? And so he was really proud of it. And I go, I'm gonna snap a picture of it. He says, okay. And I'm like, are you from Colombia? And he said, no, I'm from California. And I go, so is your family from Colombia? And he goes, no. And I go, do you know what would happen to you if you wore that tattoo in Colombia? And he kind of laughed about it, you know, and I said, they would cut it off of your arm, dude. I mean, our kids don't understand how dangerous this drug business is. They think it's so glorified and it's a quick way to make money, and they have no idea what they're getting themselves into. Funny story, Nurse Nancy's heard this. We have quite a few language barriers, obviously between our Spanish grows and now our Chinese grows. This was on the door of an indoor grow that we served a search warrant on in Bixby. And it was the last thing you saw when you walked out the door. And I thought, ooh, it's probably something really cool, right? Like snitches get stitches, or, you know, nothing gets said after this point. So I took a picture of it, and we found somebody who spoke Mandarin and had it translated. And what it really said was, don't forget to turn off the lights. So it's not always 100% serious, you know. I just thought it was funny because I thought, man, it's got to be something bad, right? If it's the last thing you see before you walk out of this big illegal grow. But they are super elaborate. They're not all outdoor, like I said. Some of these grow rooms have air monitors inside of them that regulate the oxygen and the CO2 and everything for these plants. They're on timers with their lights. People have suits that they put on, like lab suits that they wear in here, not to mess up the plants. You know, intricate irrigation system, hydroponics, aquaponics. But what it all boils down to is the damage that they're doing to our state. And now I'm running out of time. I have 6 slides left. If you have to leave, feel free, but I'll finish for the people who want to stay. I could talk about this for hours, so trying to cram it all into an hour is tough, but I'm talking as fast as I can. What it basically boils down to is that these illegal grows are ruining our farmland. They're ruining our state. They're buying up land that used to have cows on it, used to have horses, used to grow our food. And now they're leaving it like this. They come in, they grow their marijuana, they get the money that they're looking for, and then we either shut them down or they leave because they're afraid they're going to get caught. They leave with trash, pesticides, gas, oil spilled on the ground. It will never ever be used again to farm or put animals on. It's destroyed. One more thing that we do is our Drug Endangered Children program. Anybody who says that personal drug use is a victimless crime is completely uneducated, because we go into houses like this where small children are left alone, unattended. They sleep on dirty mattresses with no bedding. There's no food in the refrigerator. They have to go to school just to get their hot lunch and their hot breakfast. They watch younger siblings they're responsible for while their parents are out dealing drugs, buying drugs, using drugs. We work in that program to make sure that we do the best for these children and not to leave them in situations like this. That's my newest puppy, Indiana Bones. Couldn't leave her out. And that's my baby Duke. Thanks for watching. That's all I have. Does anybody have any questions? I'd be happy to answer any questions that you have. And there's my email too. If you don't want to ask right now, feel free to shoot me an email or text me on my cell phone. I'll be happy to answer any questions that you think of later too. And Nurse Nancy always knows how to get a hold of me as well. But I thank you for inviting me, and I hope you enjoyed this.
Thank you so much for your time today. We really appreciate you taking time out of your day to talk to our instructors and some of our fellow agency peeps that decided to join us. We did record this, so it is going to be shared out to some of the people that have reached out because they couldn't make it to either summer conference to your session, or that they couldn't be here today. So really appreciate you coming on. Thank you.
My pleasure. Thank you again.